Hello everybody, it's Mike here at Game from Scratch, and today we're checking out the Unigine game engine. Now this is one that's been around for quite some time now. You're going to notice it playing in the background. This is actually one of the examples using the evaluation kit that you can download freely for 30 days. Now unfortunately, in order to download it, you have to register with them and they're a little random about getting back to you. But this is definitely an engine you can check out. And this is one I've been intending to check out for quite some time. But one of the big problems that they had, at least in the past, is that the pricing was just kind of insane, especially when it came to game developers. This isn't one that's been used to make a ton of games. It's made a handful of games over time, but the pricing kind of always put it out of reach for most people. But they've moved to more of a subscription-based model that is targeted at indie developers. We will check out the pricing very, very shortly. But what you're seeing in front of you is running at 4K at 30 to 60 frames per second on my machine. Pretty steady, and this is a game engine that is capable of doing some very pretty results. Now, originally it was quite often used in engineering or quote-unquote real-world gaming, things like military simulators and the likes. And it's actually from UniGene Corp out of Russia. Now, this actually started 14 years ago, so there's a ton of pedigree with this particular engine. And in fact, you probably know UniGene more from making benchmarking tools than you do from making game engines. And UniGene Heaven is commonly used as benchmarkers by companies like LTT or Linus Tech Tips, and various other technical sites that use it for benchmarking computer performance. And it's powered by this ultimate game engine. And as you can see, the results from this engine are quite good looking. Now, there are some limitations. There's almost no mobile support. There's VR support. There's support for various different desktops. Additionally, the development tools are available for Windows and Linux. Oddly enough, there used to be a Mac version, but they seem to have dropped that for some reason or another. But we're going to be checking out Unigine today, going into a little bit of details. We'll get into the editor, the coding interfaces, the option you have as a programmer, and then, like I said, we'll jump into their website, take a look at the pricing structure for this particular engine, and yeah, so this gives you an idea of what Unigine is capable of for rendering. Again, if you are traditionally used to benchmarking sites, you've probably encountered Unigine in the past. It is definitely an impressive game engine. All right, so without further ado, let us jump in a bit closer. So let me just get this out of the way. Go away. All right, so here we go. This is what you get when you launch up the Unigine launcher. And you see I have a couple of different versions open right here. We've got superposition. That was the video we just watched. And part of the reason why it is running a bit slower than a full constant 60 frames per second, which is what I would normally expect, is because I have the editor running in the background. And of course, I've got video capture software running as well. So here we are. We are in the editor right now. This was the exact scene we just saw. And you'll notice the performance is, again, pretty solid, especially considering I'm video capturing while we go. This is the scene we were just working with. You can go ahead and place entities in the scene. The renderer preview that you get is pretty much exactly what you see final results. We've also got the ability to turn particle effects or gravity effects on and off. So there's gravity kicking in. Oddly enough, when you turn it, there's a reset portion, and we can also turn particles. So you see those particle systems that are being shown there. We can turn them on and off. But mostly this tool is used for placing things in the world. So we got all these light prefabs being placed around the world, for example. And you'll notice something else going on here. So every once in a while, you'll see a little icon that has like this, a pair of parentheses around it. This is a coded object. So I'm going to go ahead, we'll select this guy, and you'll see you've got a hierarchy of nodes over here. So this is under the lamps group. This is this particular lamp. So the ceiling lamp here, and we're going to expand that node hierarchy out. And you see there's various different options there, including a logic emission object. And this is where Unigine script is being used. So they've got their own scripting language, which is very C-like in nature. We'll get back to this in a little bit. Plus, they've also got the ability to behind the scenes to code in C++ or in C# script. So this tool you mostly use for placing entities in your scene. Down here you can see the various different things that go together, the scene composition. So we're in the superposition folder here. So we've got various different things that go ahead to make up the nodes in the scene. So we got props, for example. I drill into props, light bulbs, and we'll see a light bulb is being made out of, so there's an FBX file used to create it, and then those will go to create nodes that you can then drop into the scene. And placing something is literally just a matter of dragging and dropping a node in, and an instance of it is created. So it's a pretty straightforward structure. We've also got things here for materials, properties, Here's the world, everything that makes up our world. We can toggle things in and out. And you'll notice there's this hierarchy type support. Things are made up of other nodes or other nodes parented to them. In some ways, it's very much like Godot in the way its hierarchy works. In terms of file formats, most 3D things should be brought in as FBX files, which you should be able to export in various degrees of success from pretty much every major content creation tool out there. So yeah, in essence, this is your primary editing window. I'll just go ahead and exit out of this guy, and then we'll go back and we'll look at, here's some of the code. So this is the code running that script we just saw. And you're gonna notice it's broken down into a couple of key sections. So if you wanna jump in and see how things are organized, the entry point for all intents and purposes is this app world logic. You'll find it in the hierarchy for the superposition example. So we got app world logic, and it's just calling various different things in the life cycle. So we got init, update, render, flush, and shut down, and destroy. So various different points of time. So basically your game loop is here, your game rendering is here, your setup is here, and then your destruction is down here. And that's pretty straightforward. You'll noticing the big thing that they've done here is in init, they create a main logic, and then in update, they just call the update of main logic. So it's logical, pun intended, to jump into main logic next. And here's where you see they're doing things like parsing startup commands and settings and so on. And this is essentially, go down here, you will find the update call, or there's the initialization code for setting up a game program. This is C++ code, by the way. Here we go down. You can see code here for handling virtual reality headsets if you happen to have them. But it's all pretty straightforward, and it's clean and easy to understand C++ code, which is the part that I appreciate. But essentially here is your main game loop. So this is where everything happens. So they call it update players, update objects, controls, and then they're kind of just basically looping through as it goes. And then ditto here is your render loop. And those are once again being called back here in your app world logic script. And then finally what you'll see here is we've got the ability to control, this is a scriptable thing. I can connect properties to things in the game world and attach them back. So this was like a switch that was, so see the object switch receiver. You can see all these different objects. So we got an object for the dart, for breakables, movable objects, ropes, and so on. These are all things that can be instanced in your game world. And here's how you can link parameters back to, so these are all exposed. I wish I hadn't closed the editor already, but you can see these properties can then be set in the editor, and this is how you would link code to editable objects, and you can set properties back and forth. So this is something that is going to run in the game world. So if you want to see how instance objects work, at least in a C example, you can see that all of these object files, things that start with OBJ, those are things that can be used or linked as properties to objects in the world to give them logic or programmability. So that is a very, very quick tour of one of the examples that's in there. Don't want to save that. What you're going to find now, and I'm going to quickly create a demo from scratch. So here we are. This is the main launcher you get when you first come into it. You'll notice here we're in the project tabs. So we've got 3 different projects. I'm going to come back here and create a new one in a second. I'm going to give you a quick tour of this before we move on. SDKs is where you go ahead and download the most recent version. As you can see, I'm using the 30-day trial evaluation, but they still give you quite a bit of functionality in this evaluation version, including support for a number of different add-ons. I've installed all of the different add-ons that are available. So we got terrain generators. We got a bunch of props and models that we can drop in a world. We got some vegetation we can start with, some visual effects stuff that we can start with, and we're going to see all of those in just a second. Plus, there are a ton of samples. So if you want to come here and start learning, we got demos, which is where I downloaded those 3 that we saw earlier, or Oil Refinery, and the one that we saw running was Superposition, which coincidentally does have VR support. And then there's a number of other ones that you can start with as well. You'll head on over here. You see there's also examples for Unigine script examples for various, like, simpler things that you do all the time. Plus we've got C++ specific examples and C# specific examples. So here's how you program specific nodes in C# or scripts and so on. So all of the stuff that you need to know is here. Plus we've got some knowledge base. We've got the full online documentation. You can check that out as well. So there's a lot here that you can start from. But the key thing is we're going to go ahead and create a new project. So when you're creating your project, it brings up this create project window, which apparently I cannot move. Okay, that's annoying. So here, let's go ahead and name it. So my project. You set a location for it. You pick the SDK version you want to use, the engine of development versus release. I'm just doing development at this point in time. You can start with a template. It's basically VR or no VR. I'm going to stick with no VR. And then here you can pick your IDE and your language combination. So you can do C#.NET Core, C#.NET Framework, C++, Visual Studio 2015, C++ Qt, or you can do it with just scripts only. I'll do C# in this particular case. We'll do C#.NET Framework. You can pick your architecture, which is 64-bit or 64-bit. Personally, I would recommend 64-bit. And then down here, you can do your precision. Now, precision is actually one of the big details that they've got with this, because a lot of it was for recreating real-world high-fidelity simulations. So they have a lot of detail you can do in positioning things in your world. Now, next up, we can come down here, and you'll see we have options for plugins, which really, I'm not going to use any of these things specifically, but if you wanted to have Vive or Oculus support or Kinect support, etc., Leap Motion, you can do so via plugins. But what I'm interested in here is add-ons. And these are the things I added on earlier, pun again, not intended. So there's the European countryside, visual effects, and we'll drop vegetation in there as well. So we got those 3 add-ons going on, and now let's go ahead and create our new project. Now this takes, it's actually not that long, but it is kind of boring. So I'm going to let it go ahead and load up, and then I'm going to load the project for the first time so it can compile all the shaders. It's going to take a couple of minutes, so I will be back in just a second. Okay, actually, before I continue on, a little bit of a tip. So my project is created, and I'm actually recording this at 4K, and I want to show you something kind of important. Once it's done, come on in here and go to Open Folder, and you're going to notice that your project actually contains an instance of the editor within the project. So if I come in here to the bin folder, for example, you'll see we have a copy of the editor right here. Now, what I want to do is actually open that one up, go to Properties, Compatibility, and then we're going to change the DPI mode. Just come down here, override, and set it to System Enhanced. This application does not have good DPI scaling. So if you're on a high DPI monitor, you're going to want to make that change yourself. And then once you've set that there, you should, in theory, be able to come back here, and you've got a choice between editing the content or editing the code. Let's look at the code really quickly. It's pretty straightforward. So I mentioned it's a Visual Studio project for using .NET Framework in this particular case. They seem to be tied around Visual Studio 2015 in the other case, so hopefully this doesn't throw an error. Here you go. So here you see the same things that we saw when we were in C++ are kind of here as well. So you got your app world, which kind of is the overarching world logic, takes care of everything when your world loads up. You can set up scripts that run and so on. We have app editor logic. It takes effect only when the editor is loaded, so this kind of be your tool scripts area. And then system logic exists during the application lifecycle. So this is basically your game state. So init, update, render, and shutdown. This is where you would put basically the world logic, which, sorry, not the world logic, because that would be here, but your game logic would go in here. And then finally we got main, which basically just creates all of those systems and then starts it off. So it's pretty straightforward where your code goes and where things are. Again, it is also quite well documented, so I'm not going to get into a ton of details on the coding side. In fact, that's about where we're going to leave it, other than a quick example of Unigine script in just a second. So I'm not going to save that either. All right, so the big thing you're going to probably want to do is go ahead and edit content. So this should be high DPI supported. And again, this process does take a little bit of time just because it's got to compile all the shaders of all those add-ons that I linked in as well. So I'm going to pause this until it is done. So I will be right back again. All right, so our project is now loaded. It had to do something like 750 material compilations, so it did take a bit of time. But here we are. You see it pretty straightforward. You can use right mouse button to toggle and look around. The WASD keys move you around just like you would normally expect in a scene. You can select objects, and you'll notice over here, here is your world graph. It's a node of entities in your world. You can have empty ones like the content folder here. If you turn something off, just like kind of in Godot, it trickles down through the entire node hierarchy unless you manually turn something back on. You'll notice here we have this material ball in our world, or we have things like our main player. We can do things quite simply. We can create new nodes in our world. So let's go to the content node here and create, and you see you've got a bunch of options here. You've got primitives like cubes and cylinders and so on, empty nodes, reference nodes, and so on, meshes. You can import in terrain, water, sky maps, and so on. What I'm going to do now is just go ahead and create a light. We'll create an Omni light. Just drop one in the scene like so. And you'll notice you got your transform, select, move. Use the standard QWERTY keys for switching between them. But you'll notice you get your real-time lighting effects as a result. Additionally, you can click select things. You can right-click on them over here for quick move. So if I want to do focus the camera or move the camera towards the object, we can do so. Once we've got something selected, you've got all of the properties here under its node properties over here. So you see a lot of the details about the surfaces attached to it, the shaders that are attached to this particular guy. So I can come down here also, we can go to physics. So let me grab this guy Oops, I grabbed the wrong thing. I grabbed the floor. All right, so let's grab this. Okay, material, ball, and let's move this guy up into space. So what I could do is I could go ahead and turn this into, for example, a rigid body. Actually, that should probably be sufficient. So we can come up here, we can turn simulations on. So yep, we're good to go. And then you will see that physics is going to take over. Oh, I need to, sorry, one sec. Go ahead and add a shape to it. So once we've got a physics shape on it, boom, physics works in our world. And you see the simulation is running full time. So as I move things, it's going to kick right back in. And that is essentially how you move and place entities in your world. You can have hierarchies of entities as well. So I'm going to go ahead, again, in this content folder, I'm going to show you very quickly how we can use Unigine script on an object in the world. So first we need something to add to the world. So let's come down here. Go to vegetation. You see we got a bunch of different things here. So let's grab an oak tree. This is from the add-ons that we put in here. So you highlight something and you can see a preview of it over here. So let's take a tree and add a tree into our world like so. Let's make sure that this is part of the content just to keep our things going consistent. So see, under content now we have this oak tree. We can toggle the visibility of it off and on right here. Let me just go ahead, move the camera to it. Ooh, that's not what I wanted. Oh, I moved it to the camera. Okay, that's really not what I want. All right, so let's just grab this guy, move this back to 0. So you can also edit it directly this way if you so wish. All right, so there we go. We got our tree at the origin. Zoom out a bit because it is kind of huge. And now I'm going to show you how we could go ahead and actually add some animation to this guy. So instead of doing this, we're going to go to here to content. We'll go to create. And down here at the bottom, you have logic nodes, things like triggers. What we care about here is an expression. We're going to create a new world expression. And we'll focus it around our tree like so. With the world expression selected, let's drop that into content, and then we'll connect the oak to the world expression. So the oak tree is parented to this expression, and you'll see here we've got the option we can link it into a code file. Instead, I'm going to do this via direct code inline, so I'm going to just copy and paste this in. So this is some Unigine script, very straightforward. You can see we get a copy of our node, the frame rate that we're moving at, we multiply it by 90-degree rotation, and then we're basically just applying that rotation every frame, and there you see the immediate result. Now if you don't want the engine to be updating, by the way, you turn this guy off and save and edit, and then the simulation, okay, am I lying? Oh no, it's this one, sorry. So you can turn the simulation off so it only runs when you actually want it to, but there you see we're parented it to that child node. Now at the same time, if I selected just that world expression and I moved it around without moving its children, the rotation would happen relative to that as well. So it's through this node hierarchy that you can create really complex structures. You could also go ahead and basically template out any one of these nodes and reuse them, just kind of like anything down here is. Now the other cool thing is especially from the add-ons, we could bring in some more advanced ones here. So let's go down here. We're going to go into the node selection here. You're going to see there's a bunch of defined nodes. So for example, if we needed fire in our world, this came from the add-ons. Just drop that into the world. So let's put our simulation on, and there you see we now have some fire. And there's some really cool effects that actually come shipping with it. So if we want a water explosion, kapoof. So with it select, you're going to see that fire, for example. I'm going to the edit mode on it. You're going to see there's actually quite a bit of complexity to it. So there's a bunch of different nodes that go together to make it up. And a lot of these are going to be just basically straight out particle systems. So you can see the particles that go ahead to make up this particular particle system going on. And yeah, that's kind of essentially it. So that's the basics of the Unigine editor. Of course, I'm only scratching the surface of what it's all about, but basically on this end, you compose your world and you can apply basic scripts to it. And then on the back end, you can have your code be either C++ or C# where you do your game logic. And then you can also kind of have links between them. So for example, we have this refresh time link that we could add as a property to things and then expose it that way. So this could be added as a property here. So I could say add a new property. We'll link that guy in over here, and now you've got access to it. Well, these guys, these node bases, these things like this refresh time, we can create those. Remember all those OBJ files we saw in the C++ example? Well, that's how you would create them, and then you just kind of link them over to the object, add them as properties, and then you can have a back and forth logic going there. So it's definitely an interesting approach to engines. The node hierarchy, again, kind of reminds me a bit of Godot, whereas the coding behind this reminds me of actually, it's kind of unique in a way. It's got a very clean coding structure. Probably the closest I can think of is more along the lines of, You know, nothing's coming to me immediately. The C++ is much closer to using normal C++ than it doesn't have a ton of stuff built up like what you would see with something like Unreal Engine, for example. And the C# side of things is a much different experience than what you get from using something like Unity, because your code is much closer level, much less abstracted. Is, you know, you're writing a game loop, and then you use it much more like a framework on that side of things. So if you're a really code first person, you may actually really like the Unigine editor, Unigine experience. I mean, the editor is mostly for placements, and then you can do a lot of your logic on the other side. Or again, you can use the editor entirely with doing these inline scripts to actually control things. So that is the engine, the editor, and so on. Let's go take a look at the details of it. So if you want to check it out, it's available at unigine.com. As I mentioned earlier on, they do have a 30-day trial if you go to the Get Unigine, but we're going to go through kind of their summary. You're going to see from the way they advertise things that a lot of their target market was really towards, again, simulations, enterprise, virtual reality systems, presentations, visualization, and then a bit of games. If you go over to the Wikipedia page, though, the list of games it's pretty small. It's maybe a dozen games that they've got listed here, most of which you've probably never heard of. But what you see here, they're advertising things like 3D planet system with geographic coordinates, 64-bit for precision. You can create real-world scale virtual scenes up to the size of a solar system. So if you're creating a game like Free Space, this could be a good engine for that. Oculus Rift and HTC support curved screens, monitor walls, caves, and multi-channel image generation. So again, used quite a bit in, display presentations and so on, and you can definitely see that in the way things are done. Superior performance for handling of CAD and 3D scan data. Again, there's an enterprise level feature thing. Compatible with standard content including FBX, OpenFlight, GeoTIFF, etc. Embeddable into existing C++ and C# code bases, and much, much more. So if you want to check it out, it's split into 3 different versions. You've got the entertainment version, the engineering version, and the sim version. Sim version is a negotiated thing. This is the full fat version. Here's where you get things like full-on support, on-site stuff, curved screen support, cave support, so on. So if you're making a presentation or a simulated room or something, you would use the sim version. Engineering, again, isn't really for us in this particular case, but if you wanted it, it's 10 grand. So again, this is why Unigine hasn't really been used that much in the indie space, but they've recently switched it up. So now you can actually get the entertainment version. So this is basically what we were showing today. It's Unigine 2 with a custom splash screen, so that's not too bad. Video grabbing support. So a lot of those things that they're talking about, like CAD data importing, multiple monitor, and all that stuff, is stripped out of this version, and you don't get professional support. So it's community only support. But otherwise, you get subscription, you get SDK updates during the entire time, and they do an update every 3 months, I believe. So you get pretty regular updates with it. But the key thing here is it's $83, which puts you, let's see. Unity Pro is $125. Godot is completely free. CryEngine is 5%. Unreal Engine is 5%. So you kind of got a gamut. Obviously it's more expensive than a completely free engine, but compared to the likes of Unity in a professional capacity, so if you're going to actually ship a game or a product and make money off of it, $83 a month is a bargain compared to $125. And then when you look at a royalty versus or like a percentage base like what Unity and CryEngine use versus a monthly subscription, it gets tricky as well. And also keep in mind, this is per developer. So if you have multiple people coming in there, that cost does definitely ramp up. Whereas if it's a straight percentage, obviously that cost is always going to be the same as what it was. So anyways, that is Unigine 2. Just a very quick hands-on look. It's definitely an interesting engine. I think they kind of missed the boat on just timing. Like, they could have been the indie engine early on. It's been around for a very long period of time. It's just they were really slow offering this tier. So it's nice to see that the option is out there. And I think there are certain people out there that are really going to like the programming approach that they took with Unigine. So if what you saw here does appeal to you, do just come on in here, go to the Get Unigine SDK, and then do try. And then unfortunately, you have to send them off this simple form, which is kind of hilarious because when I sent it off as a game from scratch, I never got any response. But this release, I did it as a Hotmail, my throwaway Hotmail account, and I even did a typo. I don't even know if it's I still have the launcher up here. So right here, you'll notice I am called Bib Dole, and that one they approved. So they seem to be a little random about getting back to you on that 30-day trial, but this one they approved like within a couple of hours, and I got a hold of it. So if you do want to check it out, they do have this 30-day trial available. So yep, that is the UniGene game engine. I'm curious to hear what you think of it, or if you've actually got hands-on experience with UniGene in the past. It's a very mature engine. Again, it's been around for 14 or 15 years. It just hasn't been targeted at game developers, and there is a lot here. It works a bit differently than what you were expecting, but in some people, that is definitely going to be a strength. If you wanted to get really into the nitty-gritty on coding, you probably will actually like the way this engine works in a lot of cases. So anyways, that is it. That is the UniGene engine, a quick hands-on. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below, if you have used it, what you thought of your experiences and so on, or if you're thinking about checking it out. Okay, that's it. Talk to you all later. Goodbye.